came right up beside me, and I remember feeling a tug.
Welcome to WatchMojo UK, and today we'll be taking a look at the top paranormal sightings in Britain.
What I did see was a green shimmering light for about quarter of an hour.
First up, here are the top 20 alien close encounters in the UK. Number 20, the Essex Trio. On the 10th of September 2005, numerous witnesses from around Loughton in Essex reported seeing trios of bright orbs flying through the sky, described as being orange and balls of fire. Many of the people were so shocked by what they saw that they called 999 to make their reports, apparently thinking that the UFOs were a police emergency. Years later, and documents relating to the events became public, and they'll send a chill down your spine. At least one witness said they felt as though they were being watched by the orbs. It appears Essex is a favourite spot for these orbs, as they were seen again in Romford a few days later. Number 19, the Norfolk UFO sightings. Believe it or not, Norfolk is the UFO capital of England, with close to a third of Norwich residents surveyed in 2021 saying they'd had some kind of run-in with extraterrestrials. Remarkably, 2020 alone saw a spate of UFO sightings across the country, around 56 reported. One of the more interesting sightings was seen by 11 witnesses in November 2020, where bright lights were spotted moving erratically through the sky. It was also noted that UFO sightings increased during the first lockdown that year. It seems many spent the months indoors, looking out the window, hoping that something interesting would happen, and it did. Number 18, ageist aliens. Though it would be proof that we're not alone in the universe, most people probably don't want to get abducted by aliens. But what if you encountered some aliens that said they didn't think you were good enough to be abducted? That's exactly what happened to a man called Alfred Burtu when he saw a flying saucer descend near a canal in Hampshire in 1983. According to him, he approached and even communicated with the aliens, but being as he was 77, they decided he was too old to be worth their time and told him to clear off. That's gotta hurt. Number 17, Elsie Olsons' lost time. While many UFO incidents are destined to fade into obscurity, Elsie Olson wrote an entire book detailing her encounter with a spacecraft in 1978 called One Step Beyond, a personal UFO abduction experience. Olson claimed that she saw a UFO descend above the A5 in Northamptonshire while she was driving, and that when she drove under it, her journey mysteriously took an additional 15 minutes. Lost time has been a staple of UFO abduction mythology for years, and since she did see the UFO, that was the obvious conclusion. She went on to do additional research into ufology. Number 16, the disappearance of William Schaffner. American pilot William Schaffner ended up getting stationed in RAF Binbrook in Lincolnshire and was sent out in September 1970 to investigate reports of a mysterious object late one evening. Schaffner tragically never made it back to base, disappearing over the North Sea. A month later, and a long search operation was able to recover the wreckage of his BAC Lightning fighter plane, but Schaffner's body has never been found. Though an RAF squadron leader claimed that the mysterious object was actually him during a training exercise in 2014, it's still not clear why Schaffner never made it back to base, or exactly what happened to him. Were aliens to blame after all? Number 15, Begley Heath UFO encounter. Margaret Fry was simply trying to walk to her doctor's when her journey was rudely interrupted by a flying saucer. This happened in London in 1955 and is one of the capital's most notable sightings. It happened when close encounters were already on the uptick. The UFO in question was also witnessed by her GP and a handful of kids nearby, and was a relatively standard flying saucer, which landed at a nearby junction before quickly leaving again. Decades on, and a local paper embarked on a campaign to find the children that Fry said also saw the craft, but it doesn't look like anybody came forward. Number 14, Degmont Woods Incident. Also called the Taylor Incident, in 1979, a man called Bob Taylor was abducted by aliens in a rural area of West Lothian in Scotland. Taylor returned home late one evening in such a state, with his clothes torn and ruined, that when the police interviewed him, they decided he must have been assaulted. The only problem was that Taylor distinctly remembered seeing an enormous flying saucer. In the decades until his death in the 2000s, Taylor always stuck to his story, and everybody he knew testified to the fact he wouldn't have made up something like that. Today, there's a plaque in Degmont Woods to honor Taylor and his story. Number 13, Bwin Mountain UFO Incident. Was an earthquake in 1974 actually the impact of an alien spaceship crashing into a mountain range? Lots of people in Wales certainly think so. The Bwin Mountain UFO Incident is so famous on the other side of the River Severn, it's been nicknamed the Welsh Roswell. As the story goes, a bright light was seen in the sky over the mountains, and the sighting was followed by an earthquake. Earthquakes are quite rare in the UK, so feeling a 3.5 magnitude tremor in Wales didn't go unnoticed. However, no impact crafter from any kind of aircraft, be it human or alien, was found in the mountains, though many still believe something supernatural was to blame. Number 12, Cosford UFO Mystery. Along with Norfolk, Shropshire is up there on the list of aliens' favourite destinations on the British Isles. But the Cosford UFO Mystery isn't the mystery of why aliens are in Shropshire to begin with. Though that certainly is mysterious, it's a particularly strange encounter that happened in 1993. Triangular UFOs were spotted across the British countryside, most notably at bases RAF Cosford and RAF Shawbury, where many experienced airmen also saw the phenomena and weren't able to identify it. The Ministry of Defence even investigated because the reports were so credible, and it remains a major part of Shropshire's local folklore. Number 11, Kim Wilde meets E.T. She's been out of the public eye for a while, but back in 2009, Kim Wilde came out publicly to say she'd had a close encounter in her garden nonetheless. Yes, aliens descended on Kim Wilde's house in Hertfordshire and hovered around in the sky for the better part of 2 hours, in a craft Wilde describes as being like the moon, but also not like the moon, as it was bright and clearly visible, but moving erratically, something the moon doesn't do. Not to worry though, somebody else saw the UFO as well, and wouldn't you know it, they took a picture. Wilde later dedicated a song to the aliens that visited her that day. Number 10, Diamond in the Sky. In 1990, 2 hikers outside the small village of Calvine, Scotland, made history with one of the most convincing UFO photos ever taken. However, bizarrely, this photo was allegedly covered up in the 1990s by the Ministry of Defence, which apparently had a one-man department investigating UFOs for a number of years. Before the existence of this department was even public knowledge, the photo of a large diamond-shaped object did the rounds of various intelligence organisations before vanishing forever. Only a reconstruction of the supposed image remains. Number 9, the Berkshire Rugby Ball. Nobody expects a rugby ball to come flying at them when they're piloting an Airbus 34,000 feet over Berkshire, but that's apparently what happened to one unlucky pilot. Only 20 miles away from Heathrow Airport, the pilot was convinced this mysterious object was going to crash right into the cockpit. He even ducked. It was reported to the authorities as a near miss in 2014, and an investigation was launched, ultimately with no results. To this day, there's no explanation for what exactly he saw. Number 8, Todmorden UFO Incident. Hypnosis has been known to work wonders for alleged abductees. It certainly did when it was used on PC Alan Godfrey after a close encounter in 1980. He clearly recollected a craft the size of a bus in the northern village of Todmorden. After various calls from the public who were concerned about a herd of cows escaping, presumably spooked by the ship, a stranger named Joseph supposedly took Godfrey aboard, where a number of little creatures, or robots, examined him. Several other officers and a lorry driver also claimed to have seen something similar, adding credibility to his account. Number 7. The Dudley Dorito. The Midlands' most famous alien spaceship, the Dudley Dorito, has been sighted many times in recent years. Not only have there been eyewitnesses, but some of them have even managed to photograph or film the mysterious shape. The object gets its name from the area where it appears and its triangular shape, looking like a big crisp in the sky with a few bright lights to boot. For at least a decade, it's plagued the skies, roughly 5 times the size of a jumbo jet, and people are still at a loss for explanations. Number 6. The Copper Man. The oldest alien incident on our list occurred throughout the 18th and 19th centuries in and around Portsmouth, where a mysterious entity, retroactively called the Copper Man, was repeatedly sighted. While only really known to locals, this story of a human with metal skin, first recorded in 1798, is incredibly weird. A young maid even saw the man with metal flesh walk out of the sea and then go back in again, disappearing. But this frightening creature hasn't been seen at all since 1801. Number 5. The Stanley Sorcerer. When police were called out to a woman's house late one evening in 1984 because she claimed to have seen a UFO, they presumably didn't expect to also be faced with the object in question. However, when they arrived, the mysterious craft was still visible overhead and stuck around long enough that they had a chance to do a rough sketch of it. The RAF also reported not having any planes in the sky that evening. As the story goes, the police even attempted, unsuccessfully, to follow it down the M1. Number 4. Ilkley Moor Alien Sighting. On a cold evening in 1987, retired policeman Phil Spencer was out for a walk on Ilkley Moor, Yorkshire, on his way to visit family. He also had an idea to take photographs of strange lights he'd seen on the moors, but definitely got more than he bargained for. He saw a strange being, took a photo, and chased it back to a UFO, which quickly took off. The photo was then analysed by optical physicist and ufologist Dr. Bruce Maccabee. The conclusion was that it had not been edited and the creature was no known animal. Number 3. The Envoy. The Ministry of Defence may have acted shadily on occasion, but in this instance, they apparently didn't think anything of a strange man claiming to be an envoy for an extraterrestrial diplomat who wanted to speak to the authorities. The man said he'd been in contact with aliens, specifically an alien named Algar, since he was age 7, and that Algar was finally ready to reveal himself publicly. Unfortunately, before this could happen, Algar was supposedly killed by some other aliens. The MOD never chased it up. We can kind of understand why though, it does make for quite the story. Number 2. The Falkirk Triangle. When you think of the UFO capital of the world, the first thing that springs to mind probably isn't the village of Bonnybridge, Scotland, also nicknamed the Falkirk Triangle. But it's this area's claim to fame ever since sightings began in 1992. For whatever reason, aliens seem drawn to this patch of land between Falkirk, Stirling, and Bonnybridge. Though skeptics believe that it's all a scheme by a local politician, Billy Buchanan, to attract tourists. But there's still hundreds of reports of strange lights and objects in the night sky. Number 1. The Rendlesham Forest Incident. So significant it's nicknamed Britain's Roswell, what happened at Rendlesham Forest in Suffolk in 1980 has baffled people for decades. Centering on an airbase RAF Woodbridge over a few nights at the end of December, many high-ranking officials claimed to see a UFO come down in the woods. Personnel went on to investigate and found a glowing metal object that left burn marks behind. The incident spooked so many people that the MOD were forced to issue a public statement that national security was not at risk. Next, we're going to be taking a look at the 10 most terrifying ghost sightings in Britain. Number 10. Whitby's Phantom Hearse. Whitby's most famous supernatural resident might be Dracula himself, but there are plenty of strange encounters that don't involve the world's most famous vampire. One in particular is a story attached to St. Mary's Church, which was also an important setting in Bram Stoker's magnum opus. A phantom hearse pulled by black horses appears at the graveside of a recently buried sailor, helmed by a headless coachman, which takes the sailor over the cliff and into the sea below. The grounds of Whitby Abbey itself also host numerous spectres, including a nun who was bricked up to die after falling in love with a knight. Number 9. Beast of Barmston Drain. In 2016, a mysterious creature made itself known in Hull. The so-called Beast of Barmston Drain was described by witnesses as being half man, half dog, and was seen jumping across the waterway and eating a German Shepherd. Local Hull historian Mike Covell took an interest in numerous sightings at the drain, which has seen more than 100 drowning deaths over the years. The creature was later identified as an 8-foot-tall werewolf nicknamed Old Stinker. While many don't believe the stories, some researchers have blamed the folklore on collective guilt over wiping out Britain's native wolves. Whatever the reason, you want to be careful walking near Barmston Drain at night. Number 8. The Gorbals Vampire. A shadowy monster supposedly stalks the southern necropolis in Glasgow, Scotland. In the 1950s, the urban myth began to take shape, and it was rumoured that a vampire was preying on local children. Rather than cower in fear, dozens of kids teamed up with makeshift weapons to slay the vampire head-on. This was in September 1953, and police eventually found the kids on a mission to get revenge for their fallen friends. Though an actual vampire has never been found, the raid on the cemetery definitely happened, and the vampire is immortalized as a mural painted in 2016. There was even a play made about it. Number 7. Mr. Boots. A prime candidate for one of the most haunted places in Scotland, the Edinburgh Vaults were a network of underground streets, initially used by tradesmen. They eventually became slums in the 1800s, before being closed completely. Now a major tourist attraction, some of the old residents don't seem to have left. The most notorious is Mr. Boots, so named for his loud footsteps, thought to be the ghost of a murderer. He's been allegedly photographed numerous times and has a penchant for terrorizing the visitors. One unlucky tourist even suffered a nasty head injury blamed on the ghost in 2011. Number 6. Disaster victims. First constructed in the late 19th century, the London Underground has no shortage of ghost stories to fill its tunnels. But one of the most distressing revolves around the victims of the Bethnal Green tube disaster in 1943. During the Blitz, the underground tunnels were routinely used by civilians sheltering from air raids. But on March 3rd, hundreds of people fled into the tunnels following an air raid siren, eventually leading to a fatal crush that tragically killed 173 people. Late at night, it's said station workers and commuters can hear the cries and screams of the victims of the disaster. Number 5. The Crier of Clapham. On the shores of Lake Windermere, locals and boatmen will often hear the loud wails of a monk who died hundreds of years ago, the Clapham Crier himself. It's said the monk fell in love with a fallen woman but was rejected. Rather than move on with his life, his ghost now wanders the shore crying out for help. But beware, a grisly story says that once, a novice ferryman answered the monk's cries, despite being warned away by his superiors, and decided to offer assistance. Whatever he found, he was driven completely mad, dying mere days later and taking his secret to the grave. Number 4. The Roman Legion. In 1953, local plumber Harry Martindale was working in the cellar of Treasurer's house in York fixing pipes. History was made when he saw an entire Roman legion marching through the cellar from the knees up because the old Roman road beneath the building was lowered down. Martindale gave specific details of the clothes the legionaries were wearing, and his account was consistent with the real soldiers stationed there in the 5th century. The sighting has since become famous, with an entire exhibit about it in Treasurer's house, and up until his death in 2014, Martindale never changed his story. Number 3. Anne Boleyn. Henry VIII's second wife, Anne Boleyn, was executed in 1536 on charges of treason and adultery. She's since become one of the most famous ghosts in the country. Her usual haunts include Blickling Hall in Norwich, Marwell Hall in Hampshire, Sal Church in Norfolk, and the Tower of London itself. These are all places Anne had a connection to, whether it's where she was locked up, where she may have been buried, or where she spent parts of her childhood. A vicar in Northamptonshire even claimed to have had conversations with the ghost of Anne Boleyn, while others allege her spirit appears headless. Number 2. The Pendle Witches. In 1612, a dozen people in Lancashire were accused of witchcraft, 11 women and 1 man. 10 of them were found guilty and hanged, and many came from just 2 families. The witches' ghosts are now said to haunt Pendle Hill, and sometimes are even snapped in photographs. It's thought the spirits are restless because of their gruesome demise and unfair execution. If you go to Pendle and the nearby towns today, however, you won't need to go far to find a witch. In 2012, on the 400th anniversary of the trials, the world record for the largest group of people dressed as witches at once was set. Number 1. The Hampton Court Ghost. Hampton Court, a Tudor palace built for Henry VIII, is notoriously haunted. One of the most famous sightings of all time was actually caught on CCTV in 2008. In the footage, a figure wearing Tudor clothes can be seen throwing open a set of heavy fire doors and then closing them again. Security guards said that though an alarm went off to indicate the door was open, they didn't see anybody, and neither did any of the other cameras. Plenty of skeptics believe the footage is a hoax, but many spectres are said to walk the hallowed halls of Hampton Court, including 2 more of Henry's wives, Jane Seymour and Catherine Howard. Lastly, here are the biggest UFO sightings in Britain. The Dark Peak Sonic Booms.
No one has the vaguest explanation for the mystery of Dark Peak.
The Dark Peak is part of an upland area in central England known as the Peak District. It encompasses Derbyshire, Staffordshire, and the Greater Manchester area, among others. The area is known for its numerous aircraft accidents, owing mainly to inexperienced pilots and poor visibility. In 1997, a triangular-shaped aircraft was noticed flying over the area. Roughly 1 hour later, people reportedly heard 2 massive sonic booms in the skies above Dark Peak. Fearing another crashed aircraft, the Royal Air Force went to investigate. The search included helicopters, sniffer dogs, and hundreds of volunteers. Yet they failed to find anything of note. The case remains unexplained to this day. Clapham Wood sightings. Located on the very southern tip of England in the county called West Sussex, there is a woodland area known as Clapham Wood. This is an infamous location in English lore, as it's said to be the site of satanic activity, unexplained deaths, ghosts, pets growing mysteriously ill, and yes, numerous UFO sightings. Suffice to say, it is very creepy. The area was subjected to alleged UFO phenomena beginning sometime in the 1960s, and these reports continued well into the following decade. Numerous articles have been written about the forest, but unfortunately, nothing has ever explained the area's eerie phenomena. The Westspite Incident. Located on the southwestern tip of Scotland is the site of a defence contractor working for the Ministry of Defence. This was once the location of a Royal Air Force station which operated from 1937 to 2001. Back in 1957, they experienced a truly unusual piece of aviation phenomena. A massive object, roughly the size of a ship, was observed on radar hovering at 50,000 feet over the Irish Sea. It remained stationary for 10 minutes before quickly rising to 70,000 feet and making what is reported to be an impossible sharp turn and disappearing. A report written in 2009 by Martin Shaw of the National Aviation Reporting Center on Anomalous Phenomena found no satisfactory explanation of these radar targets. Lakan Heath Bentwaters Incident. The RAF was subjected to another UFO encounter on the night of August 13, 1956. Numerous objects were reported on the radar, including something coming from the sea at several thousand miles per hour. A crew was sent out to investigate, but found nothing. Later in the evening, an object traveling upward of 4,000 miles per hour was observed on the radar. Concurrently, a fast-moving white light was seen by a pilot and ground personnel. Another pilot at nearby Lakan Heath reported being chased by an unidentified target for 10 minutes. The controversial Condon Committee made a famous declaration by saying, in this case, the probability that at least one genuine UFO was involved appears to be fairly high.
Exercise main brace.
In September 1952, the newly established Allied Command Atlantic launched a large-scale naval operation called Exercise Main Brace. They deployed various NATO technologies, including aircraft carriers and anti-submarine forces, to simulate an attack on Europe. Various UFOs were spotted throughout the operation. On September 13, the crew of a Danish destroyer observed a fast-moving triangular-shaped object with a blue glow. The crew of the USS Franklin D. Roosevelt noticed numerous silver spheres following the aircraft carrier. The most famous reports came from Topcliffe, England, when RAF crewmen observed a circular object following a fighter jet before zipping off at unimaginable speed. The reports were so alarming that the British Air Ministry opened a so-called UFO desk the following year to research and report on UFO phenomenon.
The Stan Hubard sighting.
Stan Hubard was a test pilot working for Britain's Royal Aircraft Establishment. On the night of August 15, 1950, Hubard discovered a grey discus-shaped object rimmed with sparkling lights rocking from side to side and travelling at amazing speed. 2 weeks later, he and a group of RAF personnel observed the exact same object. Everyone was visited by the Ministry of Defence's Flying Saucer Working Party, a group of intelligence officers and scientists tasked with deducing UFO observations. They concluded that it was likely a normal aircraft and that Hubard had deceived himself about its shape and speed. The second sighting was also reported as a regular aircraft, and the RAF personnel had been influenced by Hubbard's first story to believe it was a UFO. But how could this be?
Britain's first flying saucer.
It all began in June of 1950. While flying over Portsmouth, the pilot of a Gloucester Meteor reportedly witnessed a bright, circular and metallic object travelling at great speed, roughly 1,000 feet above him. RAF Tangmere corroborated with RAF Watling, who confirmed reports of an unidentified object on their planned position indicator. However, a further investigative report by the research branch found no connection between the two occurrences. Regardless, this story proved so alluring that it led to the creation of the aforementioned Flying Saucer Working Party. They in turn attributed the PPI phenomena as simple interference and the UFO as a meteorological balloon whose speed was greatly exaggerated by the pilots. Or was it an actual UFO?
Have you ever had a paranormal encounter? Let us know in those comments below.